Hello, and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just seen the latest Saw film, Saw X.
How
Saw
many
10.
of these have you seen?
I've seen them all.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was 2004 when the first one came out. And so I would have been 16. And, you know, we went to see it at the cinema, I think, against the law. But such are these things. You know, I was a rebel in my younger days. And, you know, we just love these things, you know. This is also the era of, like, torture porn. And these fit into it.
These are very torture-y.
These fit into it to a degree, although the films that really got called torture porn and defined it were the Hostel films. But these definitely fit into it. I always thought these were better than that. And they've had a much longer life. So the Saw franchise has not had 10 films, as the title suggests. It's had... well, what have we had? We've had Saws 1 to 6, then Saw 3D was 7. Oh, no, it is the 10th. Jigsaw, Spiral, Saw 10. Okay, fair enough. I thought they were more spin-offy, but they've just been given different titles, Jigsaw and Spiral. So yeah, it's the 10th in. The 10th in nearly 20 years. I'm familiar with them. And I think when we saw Jigsaw and Spiral on the podcast, you know, one of your key questions both times was, what's the appeal of these? Do you see some appeal in these that you maybe hadn't before after seeing this?
It's very...
I would start by saying I think this is the best one I've seen for a while, maybe since the first one.
Okay. No, I get that. I mean, I was thinking how much better it was than A Haunting in Venice. I mean, I don't like to be tortured like this. And I kind of... I don't get the appeal of it, right? So as I was watching it, I thought, oh, this is so good. The whole beginning with the cancer and the finding a place, and you know, I thought kind of this is really good. You know, I was surprised, right? And I was kind of wondering what was going to happen. So that was kind of, I suppose, you know, what I liked the most. It had a kind of a very, I don't know, tired, defeated, wistful air to it, the whole beginning. Yeah. So I like that. Then I kind of understood the rest, right? But I thought the film cheated. And I understand that it's part of the whole series of making retribution into an ethic. Yeah, kind of making people choose.
Yeah, the Jigsaw killer's kind of key modus operandi is that he puts people in situations where they can sacrifice relatively small things to save their own lives, and it's in order to have a chance at redemption for some wrong that they've committed.
So I thought that was all, to me, very badly weighted. Yeah,
you felt that they were too unfair.
Yeah.
I thought the time limits were a bit severe.
I thought the time limits were severe. I thought, okay, now we're entering spoiler territory.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought the people who had contributed to the crime, and we'll talk about what the crime is later, that people who had done very minor things were shown to suffer greatly and terribly, right? Then a person who is quasi-innocent is basically killed, and then the two worst perpetrators are given a relatively easy death, I think. Yeah, which I thought, like... That's not fair.
Yeah, I agree. But you got into the sort of morality of the film enough to start judging its morality. You know?
Sure, no, you know, kind of. Yeah. I mean, those are the film's terms. So
exactly.
I think you have to judge it on that, right?
Because I think it's very possible to look at this, you know, and go, "This is just all awful and wrong," and so. Yeah. But no, you're playing the game with it, you know.
And I thought there were some things that were just unthought through, right? So, for example, again. Moving forward very quickly, but at the end when they give the child the money, right? I thought, stupid. Like, you know, this is practically a Mexican, a homeless Mexican child, and you're giving him the money. It's going to disappear in 3 days. The family will take it over and, you know, kind of.
Well, I thought A, it's American money. What's he going to do with it? And B,
no, that's not an issue in Mexico.
Okay, fair enough. And B, I mean, like someone would just murder him for it in the way.
Exactly.
You see a little kid carrying a big bag.
I mean, he'll have it for like 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So, at least kind of, I don't know, give him a trust fund or something when he turns 21. Yeah, I mean, because he's got the skills to do it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I thought that was kind of, so those were all kind of my problems with the film. The other bits were the tortury bits. I mean, so I love the first dreamlike torture sequence, the one that doesn't really happen, but that could have happened. Right? I love the way that it was designed, and I kind of, I loved the fingers, being twisted and the eyes coming off, because I did love it because it wasn't fleshy, and there's something then about, the other torture, which is like drilling your brain or cutting your own leg, or there was just too much flesh and blood.
I did see you having physical responses, hands in front of the face. You weren't.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So if you're a fan of that, though, I don't understand why people are fans of that. I
had a huge smile on my face throughout because I was thinking to myself, "Oh, this is what I want to see." And
someone drilling their brain.
I really was. Because I remember one of the complaints I had with Spiral, which was the more spin-offy one with Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson. One of the complaints I had was, where is the death in this? We're taking a long time to get to the death, and something similar is going on here. But when we get to it, it's really satisfying. And I don't remember thinking that it was that satisfying. I think it's all really in Spiral, but that has always been one of the key attractions. And the thing about the early death you mentioned that you liked, it's a key feature of these films that they open with a death that is almost free of context. It's like it's the set piece that opens the film. Someone strapped to a chair, and they always die straight away, right? The joke here that is made of it is really fun. I loved it when it's revealed that it's actually something that Jigsaw is imagining he will do, and when the guy makes the correct moral decision in real life, he says, "Good choice." I mean, what a great joke, and a really nice way to start the film off. So yeah, the key strength of the Saw films, I think, is Tobin Bell,
he's wonderful.
Who plays Kramer, Jigsaw.
He's absolutely wonderful. I loved his face, like at the beginning when he's diagnosed with cancer, and his acceptance of it. Then thinking that he's found a solution, kind of. I thought he was very believable and kind of, there's a sad resignation kind of to him that I really loved in that.
And in 2004, when they made the first film, basically all he was needed for was a few flashback scenes that you're not really meant to notice him in, because you don't know at the time that he is Jigsaw. And then he just lies on the floor in this large bathroom between the two actors for the whole film, pretending to be dead. And it's only at the end when he gets up you realise, oh, this was the game all along, here he is. And that's all he was needed for. Right? Then the film becomes a ridiculous success. I mean, these films have low budgets and have made cumulatively more than $1 billion. And so he is brought back. But by the end of the third film, he's dead. Right? I mean, he has terminal cancer. He's not going to survive that for very long, and the films kill him off. And then you're thinking, is it going to go all Freddy Krueger or Halloween or whatever, and bring him back? And nothing supernatural in these things. He is dead. But the film had the series had lucked out that this actor was very good and charismatic and sold the role well and all that kind of thing. They needed ways to keep him in the story, so there would often be flashbacks with him, fleshing out his story more and more in subsequent films. And the films would often tease that Jigsaw was still alive. And there'd be the police investigation following the various murders happening, the various traps. And then it would ultimately turn out that Jigsaw was not alive, and one of his proteges was doing this, right? But the film kept on teasing that he was there and kept on giving you snatches of him still. It had to. He was wonderful. This film is pure prequel. It's not pretending anything. There's no complicated, which to me was actually really lovely to realise that's what it was doing, because some of the latter Saw films get really heavy on the convolutions. Particularly, I think Saw 5 was just so heavy on the convolutions of the various characters who were kind of the copycats or the proteges and trying to take on Jigsaw's mantle and so on and so forth. And it just got a bit... And also, none of them were as good as Tobin and Bell. They weren't as much fun to watch and so on. So I was really glad to realise that this film was just going... This is just set previous to all of that fucking nonsense. Jigsaw's just alive. And I think this is set just after the first Saw. He's had his diagnosis. We see him getting his diagnosis. And he's also... spoiler territory... he's also gained Amanda as his key protege, who he gains in the first couple of films. That's someone who he had in a trap, and she escaped, and she joined him. Right? So we see her here, and it's clearly kind of early on in their relationship as well, because she is having issues with whether they should be as harsh as they are going to be to Gabriella, the person who you say is... almost innocent in this, not as deeply into the con as the others, not as deserving of punishment.
And one of the things that bothered me about the film was that it could be seen as quite racist. Yeah. So everybody who's black or Mexican dies gruesome deaths. Yeah. And everybody who's white is either the protagonist or, the protagonist in both sense, because the villain is played by, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Sinead Makodi Lund, who I remembered seeing on television in Ragnarok.
Right.
Yeah, she's the mother of the villains in Ragnarok, and who's also been in Headhunters, which we've seen, but which I now can't remember, what her particular role is. But of course, she's the absolute Scandinavian stereotype: the cheekbones, the blonde, and she's the villainess, and she dies a kind of
She doesn't die. She's the one who lives. In that room filling with gas.
Okay.
She kills her accomplice, and she's the one who manages to live. I mean, that's the reason that I hung around in the credits, because I thought, is there going to be some final we actually see her?
But I thought it's indicated that somehow she will also die, because she's out breathing, but the room is exploding, or gas, or radiation.
It's filling with that nerve gas, which is what kills the other fella. When Jigsaw says only one of you can live,
only one of you can live.
Yes, only one of you can live.
Will live.
But he's the kind of character who really means what he says, and all the words mean something. He doesn't really lie. So, and the indication to me was that we're not just going to assume that she is stuck there forever, but we also don't see a good way for her to get out. I don't think we see the door unlock. So,
all right.
I don't know.
Well, in any case, it supports my suspicion that if you look at the film kind of structurally, isn't it interesting that kind of it's all the Mexicans die really gruesome deaths, right? Then the whitest person in the whole thing lives, and then just whilst you were thinking everything was okay, they go get the black guy at the very end, right? Yeah. So kind of,
I know what you mean.
That didn't sit very well with me.
On the other hand, something that I thought was, isn't it nice to see an American film showing Mexico as somewhere kind of nice? Mexico is so typically the place where drugs come from, crime comes from. We go there and it's all hellish and horrible. And of course, in Mexico is where all this action ends up taking place. But the whole opening of this film, in which there is hope built for Jigsaw that he might have this miraculous cancer cure, he's sent to Mexico to a really beautiful villa in the countryside, and we don't see loads of it. We're concentrating on the characters, but we see enough of it.
Well, before you over-egg the pudding, there's a kidnap express in the middle of it.
There is.
So.
Well, it's a kidnap express that is also organised by...
I know, but actually the joke or the surprise or the suspense of that moment is based on the expectation that, oh yes, those kinds of kidnappings happen all the time in Mexico.
Yes, I understand. But I thought that it was surprising to see an American film, particularly a cheapish one, go to Mexico and not have it just immediately be torture. I don't
know. I'm kind of, I don't want to give it too much credit in that regard.
But that opening act is where I think the film actually becomes elevated among so many of the others, because I really want to give credit actually to Kevin Grutet, or Grutet, I don't know how exactly you pronounce his name, who's directed a few Saw films before and he edited them and things. He's the director of this, and I want to give credit to him for making the decision that the film can be light and kind of nice to look at. One of the criticisms that we had, again, particularly of Spiral, I don't remember it quite so much of Jigsaw, is that it was ugly. And I said to you that these films do have a look, and that it did kind of fit into them, but it was very unpleasant and grimy and nasty, and it had no alteration of tone in that. It wasn't like sometimes things like the police department, might look clean and looked after, but then the dirty factory where all the killings take place is grimy. There was no variance of tone. Here there is, and then even when you get into the disused factory where all the killings are going to take place, it is grimy and it is nasty, but still you can see things, right? It's not just dim and dull and dark. It completely sells the idea that this is nasty and horrible and scary, but there is lighting on people's faces. You can see things. Like, it really baffles me when films just go all visually dark for it, and this proves that you really don't have to. I thought the lighting was very good.
Yeah, I thought it was good as well. I didn't.
I mean, you don't have to like notice with me that it's so much better than the other Saw films, but it's something that I'm so used to seeing from these. This was different.
I like the look of it, and I like the way that it moved. And again, just thinking of the earlier film that we saw in the day, right? Like, kind of, you knew where you were. You were aware of people's relationships to each other. Kind of, there was suspense built. There was excitement. You were kind of worried about what was going to happen when, and would they get away with it? Like, kind of, all of those things I think were kind of really wonderfully handled. I think what was poor to me was, again, the making it into a lesson in ethics and how to behave properly. I mean, these people are being punished because they're bad, right? And I don't mind that. Like, if you have a serial killer who's punishing people because they're bad, if that's the main idea of the film, fine, I'll go with it, right? But at least kind of try to be consistent with it, yeah? If the ethics of it is important, then what crime people did in relation to what punishment they're getting should have been some consideration. I don't think it was in this film.
Yes, the film builds in some irony, as again, the series always has done. It builds in some irony into the games, the traps, so that they, to some extent, fit the crime. So we should say, just for absolute clarification, Jigsaw has gone to Mexico for this pioneering experimental medical treatment that will hopefully cure him of his rapidly oncoming death of terminal cancer, and it appears to have gone very well. And he finds out that it was a con. These people were just taking his money, and they tried to escape. He manages to capture them with the help of Amanda, and punish them for this. So their wrong is, taking people's money and giving them all this false hope. And I think what's really effective at the opening is how it gives you all that hope yourself. It takes a long time to get to those deaths, but it pays off. It works. And so the people who've been in on this have been playing various roles. So, one of them leads the whole thing. One of them is the anaesthetist. One of them is kind of the host at the house. One of them is the cabbie. And the anaesthetist is the one I was thinking of particularly, who gets, a particularly ironic treatment, because the whole thing is that you're going to have to drill into your brain, and we've got all the tools for you. The only thing we haven't got for you is anaesthetic and the pain that's going to cause and so on, which makes sense, although the whole thing is that everyone's punishment is going to cause them pain, so it's not paying off all that specifically. But there is an attempt to do that. But ultimately, I absolutely agree with you that when you see, this girl's got to cut her leg off and get at the marrow, or the guy's got to drill into his brain and pick a bit of it out, and then you see 3 minutes come up on the timer, you're like, obviously not.
I know.
You need a minute just to process
I thought it was the other thing, because I thought, here's this, because you see her being like a sad hooker, really, right? Who's probably, been roped into this for a little tiny bit of cash, and all she's got to do is perform a role, because that's all she's doing. She's not literally, she's not drilling into flesh or giving anesthesia.
Yeah,
She's just
playing
playing a role.
She's a nurse.
So actually, to be playing a nurse for minor change, and your punishment is to have your leg cut off and then dying, I think to me was like out of order. Really.
It was a bit too much, but,
especially when you're leaving the mastermind, the blonde Aryan goddess mastermind of the whole thing, off scot-free practically. I just thought, the punishments weren't related to the crime in a film that structures it all around a kind of an ethics of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Around the morality of doing right and wrong. Yeah.
The film that I think best handled the kind of internal logic of its ethics was Saw 6, which was heavily based on the financial crisis happened. It came out, I think, 2009, 2010, and it was about Jigsaw's health insurance guy. Basically, we can't get you health insurance, and then health insurance in America is dreadful, and no one's got any money, and we're going to deny you for this, that, and the other. And so he captures his health insurance guy and a bunch of people involved in it, and puts them through these games. And there was something, I think this was the one. Anyway, and there was a thing about how these 5 or 6 people were put into the games, and obviously they die one by one. You could tell this early on. There are various things in these films that you go, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen. I know how this is working, but the revelation will clarify it at the end. If all of them had worked together during these games, then none of them would have had to die. They'd have all been injured to certain degrees, but they would have all survived. Whereas actually, when they fight each other and they're selfish and they panic, and then one of them dies every time. Which I liked. That was like a genuine sort of that really was a moral lesson.
Well, there was something similar in this film, which is when the boy and what's his name, Jigsaw, they are both pulling the lever, right?
Helping each other not die.
Yeah.
Which actually, I'm surprising. Thing is, so this is something that you see coming in this, and particularly knowing that Jigsaw is not going to die in this. I've seen him die in another film. This is set before then, so there's a plan. He's getting out of this somehow. That when he straps himself into the machine, at least I think I know, that is part of the plan. He's not going to have to improvise here. It's part of the plan to get strapped into this, to get caught and to make it look like they're failing and so on and so forth. Leaving the mobile phone out, obviously part of the plan. They wouldn't do that by accident and so on. So that robs the film of a certain degree of tension, because Jigsaw's going to get out of this. He has to. But bringing the child in, who we've never seen before, you might consider it cheaty and manipulative because it's a child who's being put in danger all of a sudden. But that raises that tension again, because all of a sudden there's someone here who I don't know is going to live. Yeah. No,
I thought that was good. I wanted to ask you, because you were saying, one is built around like the financial crisis or whatever. And I might be mixing up a couple of them, but yeah, they do respond to some extent to externals, to the social. And I was wondering what you think this film is responding to.
I mean, I did see it to some extent talking about some of the same things, but it is much more about, rather than the kind of healthcare crisis. The thing is, the Jigsaw's inability to get his health insurance to pay for his health is not going to save him in this film. It's very clear his cancer is terminal, and the only thing that purports to save him is a miracle cure. So it's not doing a criticism of American healthcare.
I didn't see it as literally about healthcare, but I did see it as about, rich, powerful people scamming the poor without consequences, or the ill, or...
Yeah, the ill. I mean, these people are definitely not poor, although they've also definitely had to scrape the money together from whatever source they can. But they are being scammed for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you get the feeling this is like people mortgaging their houses.
Okay, no, but I mean, just to take it more metaphorically, about a lack of justice in our world, right? Where kind of, because the whole film is about retribution, it's about setting to rights, right? And kind of, we live in a world where we see like rich people and government officials and so on, kind of, scamming, stealing, kind of with no comeuppance at all. And I wonder if, the film is like a kind of an imaginary resolution to those kind of real social problems, that it is offering kind of, a kind of a metaphorical or justice that doesn't actually exist in the real world.
A vicarious justice through which we can enjoy seeing
setting the world
the
to
bad
rights.
guy stuff. I think the film, the series has to some extent always had that. I think Jigsaw thing is he's one of those killers who you understand why he's doing it, right? And it's just that you wouldn't actually do it yourself because it's insane. But he has a point, and he's hurting the right people, or capturing the right people. At least, I mean, he's gone through so many traps, so I can't remember all the people who are in them. But that's definitely a thread.
We live in a world where only a serial killer can get justice.
Yeah. Crime is murky, and maybe that's the reason that, like in those other films, nothing looks nice, even the police department, because everything is dirty and corrupt. And the guy we see coming right at the end here in the mid-credits scene, Hoffman, is a cop. He's a detective who helped track down the con artists. And I know that because A, they do say I'm the detective, and B, he's been in the other films. He's one of the apprentices.
Yes, he's seen somebody familiar.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this film is rewarding for people who know the Saw films. I don't think it's hugely alienating to those who don't. It is telling fairly compactly its own story. Although clearly, if you're going to come to this with no knowledge, you're going to be faced with the fact that people definitely know who these characters are.
I didn't find that a problem. No. And, to be honest, I mean, even though I have seen to the others, I basically have forgotten them. So, and I didn't find it a problem in following this film. I mean, I think, I think I enjoyed watching it, certainly much more than I expected. I did find all the torture stuff quite gruesome to watch. And I didn't like it really. Like, it's not my thing. But I accepted that. I knew that going in, really, that I wasn't going to like that. So I think for me, the biggest weakness in the film is, well, the two things that I suppose I've already mentioned, which is, the calibration of punishment to crime, right? And the structural thing of, why is it that, kind of all the Mexicans get gruesome deaths, kind of the black person, there's only one at the end gets a gruesome death, and kind of, the white people are either, the villain or the hero in quotation marks, which, kind of are the protagonists, but don't suffer, and certainly not in proportion to the crime.
I think it was interesting. I like the fact that there was no police investigation in this film. What I think is something that you tend to forget because the Saw films are so dominated by the traps and the gore, is that they are typically police procedurals of some sort. Or the police are involved to some extent. The first one was all about the police procedural, and really so is the second. The police are always involved to some extent. Like the films will be told to some extent out of chronology. So you'll see the trap and you'll see the police coming across the body, and they might be intercut and that sort of thing. The police are on the trail and so on. And very often there's some twist where it's like, it all happened 10 years ago. Shit like that happens. I mean, they've had some great chronological twists. Fantastic. But here, there's none of that, right? The police aren't on the trail of this at all. This is personal revenge from Jigsaw. And again, in other films, he's had personal beefs with people that he sorted out with traps. But here, it's him and his accomplices tracking down the people and putting them through the games. And so the time that is spent, or would otherwise be spent, with the police chasing him down, is here devoted really to him in that room. Well, it's devoted to making that opening segment longer than I think it otherwise would be. And then it's devoted to him in that room talking to the victims and to Amanda, and basically developing his character. This is what I mean when I say the film's greatest strength is Tobin Bell, and this film is doing a very good job of making that clear, because it is giving him all the opportunity to be the character.
Well, it's a wonderful actor story that, someone who begins off Broadway and who does bit parts and crowd scenes and extra work and so on, for 20, 30 years, then ends up his career as like, leading a major kind of franchise, right? And he's 81 and, he's got a great role now.
Yeah.
So, and he's great in it. So it's a wonderful actor story.
Yes, yeah. And I really like him. And you just, you think, what would the series have been? What would it have become had he not turned out to be as good as he is? Because, like I say, at the start, they didn't need him to be good. They were just lucky that he was, in a sense. And and like I say, the films have gone on to be just ridiculously profitable. This is the story with the most successful horror is it's extremely cheap and it makes big box office, which is what these films have done. And to some extent, they used to make one a year, and then the series kind of died around Saw 7, I think. That was the 3D one, and people went, 3D, or everyone's getting in on 3D right now, and because it didn't fit in with the premium 3D films that were coming out at the time. It fit in much more with like Piranha 3D and cheap shit like that, which have their charms, but that's where it fit.
Yes.
And I think people got a little bit tired of it, but I like the fact that there's room for it to keep going, and I like the fact that they haven't, like I say, I've said it once, but I reiterate, I like the fact that they haven't gone, let's just make this story more and more complicated than before. We can just fit in as this is the story of one of the times he treated people to his games, and it just fits in. I like that very much.
Yes, I think, again, just thinking aloud, but one of the things that recurs in the film is his saying, well, the worst thing you could do is like rob dying people of hope. And I wondered, is that really the worst thing you could do? Yeah, because some of the things that he does is like quite worse. Kind of have someone chop their own leg off and then kill them anyway. Anyway.
But the point I suppose he would be making is the hope that you give is purely false. The hope I give that you can get out of this is true. It's going to be very hard to see a way to making that true, but it is true.
Sure. No, I get that. But again, kind of just, kind of wondering how to read it as if there's any kind of commentary on society within that thing. But anyway, I suppose, I enjoyed it more than I expected. The gruesome things are still kind of really unpalatable and slightly bewildering to me. I did find more humor than I have found in the past, and I thought it was kind of like really interesting filming. I didn't look at my watch once, so.
Yes, you were fully engaged, as was I, and I was slightly surprised by the structure and the tone. Like I say, that thing that this film actually has a tonal shift, and it's important that it does, and it works very well. And of the 4 previous films we've seen, including this, they're all horrors, even including A Haunting in Venice to some extent, has a horror element.
Mystery, I wouldn't call it horror. Really.
It tries to jump you and scare you and stuff. It has an element or two, that's all I'm saying. But this is by far the only one that has had a real effect. And the ones that really do properly set out to scare you, The Nun 2 and The Exorcist Believer, we didn't find very scary at all.
No.
And that's not us being macho.
But mind you, the scariness here came from the gruesomeness, really. It's a different kind of scariness.
Yeah, so, but it does get you, scratching at your skin, going, oh.
It definitely makes you go, that and cover your eyes. But I'm not sure that's a compliment.
No, it's exactly what I want, though.
Well.
So, it is a compliment. It's what it sets out to do, and I am part of that audience.
All right. Well, on that note, we recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See it if you get a chance. It's kind of it's really wonderful in a way to be immersed in this horror. So thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Happy Halloween.
It's too early, isn't it?
Don't be bad, or Jigsaw will get you.
Isn't it too early for Halloween?
Yes, it's the October 31st, but all the films are coming out now.
Right. Okay. Oh.
There was one film actually. Don't fucking have a go at me. They're the ones scheduling it. There was a thing actually in one of the films, maybe Saw 5, which was where Jigsaw was well and truly dead and he was being copycatted, where the police following the case made the point that you can't get out of these traps, and specifically you couldn't. There was one where the guy's ribs were hooked into a machine, and if he could cut off enough bits of flesh or whatever, then he'd get out. But he obviously failed to. His ribs came open. It looked fantastic. And then the police go and see this cadaver, and they realise these things are hooked in. Like, he would have to do surgery on himself to get out of this. He can't just, you can't leave. So no matter what happened, he was going to die. And that's when you realise this isn't Jigsaw. This is someone else who is not doing it properly.
No, right.
So they did actually come into one of the films.